to at least put 2 of these in your car, please. Alright, so,
Sometimes it only takes one decision to change everything. One quiet night, one secret plan, one step out the door, and no way back. In the early hours of that morning, no one heard screams. No one called for help. Just darkness, an isolated road, and then gunshots that shattered the silence. By the time daylight came, one bed was empty, and a few hours later, a discovery was made that would devastate an entire community. 2 teenagers were found lying side by side. Both had been shot multiple times, and nothing about the scene made sense. This wasn't just a murder case. It was a web of deleted messages, hidden plans, and conflicting stories. Who picked them up that night? Why were they there? And why did only one person walk away alive? Parents were left searching for answers that never came easily. A family was forced to confront unimaginable loss. And a young man would later claim that everything happened in self-defense, that he had no choice. But the evidence tells a complicated story, a timeline that doesn't quite fit, witness accounts that raise more questions than answers, and a truth that may be far more disturbing than anyone expected. Tonight, we're not just asking what happened. We're asking why, how, and who is really telling the truth. Because once you look closely at what happened that night, it becomes clear. This case is not as simple as it first appears. By the time the sun rose that Sunday morning, something was already terribly wrong. In one home, a teenage girl's bedroom sat empty, her bed untouched, her phone still inside the house. In another, a father began to realize that his son hadn't come back overnight, and that the handgun he kept locked away was gone. At first, there was denial. Teenagers sometimes stay out late. Sometimes they ignore calls. Sometimes they crash at a friend's place. But as the hours passed, anxiety turned into panic. Calls went unanswered. Friends didn't know where they were. And slowly the fear that every parent dreads began to take hold. Just before mid-afternoon, 2 ATV riders traveling along a secluded powerline path near Buckhorn Road stopped when they noticed something unnatural along the edge of the brush. What they found would haunt them forever. 2 bodies lay side by side, face up, arms outstretched. A boy and a girl. Both had been shot multiple times. Law enforcement arrived quickly, sealing off the remote area straddling the county line. Almost immediately, officers knew this wasn't a random act of violence. This was personal, the kind of crime that unfolds over minutes, not seconds. 13 shell casings were scattered across the ground in 3 distinct clusters. That detail alone told investigators this was not a single burst of gunfire. Shots had been fired, then stopped, then fired again, and finally fired once more at close range. Witnesses in the area later confirmed what the evidence suggested. They reported hearing gunshots late Saturday night, 8 to 10 shots at first, then silence. Roughly 10 minutes later, more shots rang out. It was a timeline that suggested pursuit. The girl had been shot 7 times. Some wounds were to the front of her body, others to her arm and shoulder. The final shots entered from behind and at close range. The boy had been shot 6 times, front and back. Dirt and debris on his chest and legs suggested he had been moved after he fell. This was not chaos. This was control. As identities were confirmed, the weight of what had happened began to crush 2 families. The girl was 14, a freshman, a child who still slept under her parents' roof. The boy was 18, a senior, an athlete with plans and a future that ended on a dirt road before sunrise. The most unsettling question was not just who killed them, but how they got there in the first place. Investigators quickly learned that neither teen had a phone on them when they were found. No wallets, no backpack, no obvious trail. Whatever led them to Buckhorn Road had been carefully hidden until digital forensics began peeling back what had been erased. The boy's phone data became the first breakthrough. Most of his communication took place through Snapchat, an app designed to delete messages automatically. But fragments remained, enough to tell a story. Shortly after midnight, he sent a message to a group chat of friends asking if anyone had a car and wanted free buns. He was looking for a ride and offering something in return. In private messages, the plan became even clearer. He was trying to arrange transportation to meet someone. A girl. Someone much younger. Someone who, according to the recovered messages, was sneaking out without her parents' knowledge. Though her phone had been taken away at night, she still had access to an iPad. Messages sent just after 1:20 a.m. showed careful planning. She sent an address, a map screenshot. instructions on where to park, were not to be seen, and one final message that chilled investigators to the core. Cut your lights when you get there till I get in the car. Those were the last words she ever sent. There was no evidence she agreed to any arrangement involving another person, no mention of sex, no suggestion that she understood the situation the boy had been trying to create. What she believed was happening and what he had told others did not align. Someone did show up that night. Cell phone location data revealed that another teenager's phone moved in tandem with the boy's device in the early morning hours. The two traveled together to pick her up. Then all three devices moved toward Buckhorn Road. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station placed a white pickup truck just 2 miles from the crime scene shortly after 2 a.m. The driver was alone. He appeared calm. He entered the store. Then he drove back toward the same isolated road where 2 bodies would later be found. By the time law enforcement began piecing this together, the driver was gone. Within days, a tip came in from someone who hadn't known either victim, but who had heard something that no longer felt like a coincidence. A young man told detectives that a friend had casually described killing 2 people. No panic, no remorse. Just a story told over a video call while laughing. At first, it sounded impossible. But details from that conversation, combined with phone records, vehicle data, and surveillance footage, began to line up too closely to ignore. The suspect was 17 at the time, a high school student, known by family as quiet, by friends as normal. Someone no one imagined capable of something so brutal. He was arrested weeks later, hundreds of miles away. When charges were filed, the case shifted from investigation to confrontation. And the story the defendant told would complicate everything. He claimed he had gone out that night thinking they were picking up multiple people. He said he didn't know the girl, didn't expect her to be alone. According to him, what followed was chaos. He testified that the boy retrieved the gun, that an argument erupted, that the girl threatened to call police, and that the boy shot her first. Then he said the gun turned on him. He described a struggle, fear, survival. He claimed he fired only because he believed he was about to be killed. But the physical evidence refused to cooperate with that version of events. The timing didn't fit. The shell casings didn't support a single frantic struggle. The 10-minute gap between gunfire had no explanation. The location of wounds suggested pursuit, not sudden panic. And the fact that the boy had been moved after death raised questions that no amount of testimony could erase. There was also the matter of what happened afterward. Instead of calling for help, instead of running for safety, the defendant drove to a gas station, then returned to the scene. Jurors would later struggle with the weight of all of it. They listened to parents describe the moment they realized their children were gone. They watched footage, studied maps, heard experts explain trajectories and timelines. And they listened as the defendant took the stand and spoke calmly about fear, confusion, and self-defense. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated. They could not reach a unanimous decision on the girl's death. They did convict him for the boy's killing, but not at the highest level. It was a verdict that satisfied no one, a conclusion that answered nothing. One family left the courtroom with a sentence, the other left with nothing at all. And the case, in many ways, remains unfinished. Because beyond the verdicts and the legal language, 2 truths remain unchallenged. A 14-year-old girl never came home, and an 18-year-old boy died from a weapon taken from his own house. Whatever the motive, whatever the explanation, the cost was irreversible. And for those left behind, the questions are louder than ever. What really happened on that road? Who made the first irreversible choice? And did justice truly arrive, or did it stop halfway? Those questions still hang in the air, unanswered. What lingered after the verdict was not relief, but unease. For the families, the courtroom doors did not close the pain. They simply marked the point where the legal system stopped speaking, leaving grief to do the rest. For Lyric's family, the outcome felt especially hollow. No conviction, no definitive legal answer. Just a mistrial that left the most devastating question unresolved. Who was held responsible for her death? Her mother returned home to a house that no longer felt like shelter. Instead, it became a memorial. Photos lined the walls, smiling moments frozen in time, reminders of laughter that would never echo through those rooms again. Friends described Lyric as joyful, affectionate, and deeply loyal to the people she loved. She had dreams that never made it past that night, She never got the chance to grow older than 14. For Devin's family, there was at least a sentence, but even that offered little comfort. 20 to 25 years did not feel equal to a life lost. Devin had been more than a statistic or a defendant in a courtroom narrative. He was a brother, a son, a friend, someone who looked out for younger kids, who loved sports and music, who believed his future was just beginning. Yet even his conviction came wrapped in contradiction. The jury rejected self-defense, but also rejected premeditation. They believed he was unlawfully killed, but not deliberately enough to warrant the highest charge. That split decision revealed just how fractured the interpretation of events remained. And hovering over everything was the testimony. The prosecution leaned heavily on physical evidence: shell casing patterns, wound trajectories, digital location data, surveillance footage. Each piece, when examined alone, raised questions. Together, they formed a picture that suggested movement, pursuit, and decision-making across time, rather than a single moment of panic. The defense, however, focused on fear, on confusion, on the idea that trauma can distort memory, and that not every violent encounter unfolds cleanly or logically. But instinct does not explain pauses. It does not explain returning to the scene. It does not explain silence afterward. These were the gaps jurors wrestled with, and the same gaps that continue to haunt the public. Another element complicated the case further: the behavior of the defendant's mother. Her social media activity drew widespread attention and outrage. Instead of restraint, she chose confrontation. Instead of silence, she chose commentary, mocking witnesses, criticizing families, and framing the outcome as a personal victory rather than a tragic outcome for everyone involved. For many observers, her words felt like a second wound inflicted on families already devastated. They did not change the evidence, but they changed the emotional weight of the case. They made it harder to believe this was a situation anyone had won. In the aftermath, legal analysts debated what might come next. Prosecutors left the door open. A retrial on Lyric's charge remained possible. So did a plea agreement, or the quiet dismissal of charges, justified by jury deadlock and evidentiary challenges. For now, the case remains suspended in that uncomfortable space between resolution and uncertainty. What is clear, however, is that this tragedy did not begin on Buckhorn Road. It began much earlier, with decisions made by teenagers and with a chain of choices that escalated beyond control. There are no villains or heroes in that sequence, only irreversible outcomes. The digital age played its role too. Messages sent in seconds, plans made in secrecy, evidence erased automatically, leaving investigators to reconstruct intent from fragments. In this case, technology both concealed the truth and ultimately exposed it. And then there is the question no court can answer. What might have happened if someone had spoken up earlier? If a ride had been refused? If a message had gone unanswered? If the night had simply ended differently? Those questions have no legal remedy. They live only in the minds of the families left behind. Lyric's memory is now preserved not by headlines or verdicts, but by love. Her family continues to speak her name, to share her smile, to remind the world that she was more than a victim. She was a child who trusted, who laughed easily, who deserved far more time than she was given. Devin's legacy, too, lives on through those who remember him not for the weapon he carried that night, but for the person he was before it. A teenager navigating adulthood, making mistakes, believing there would always be another chance. The justice system can weigh evidence. It can deliver sentences, but it cannot restore what was lost. And it cannot fully heal the fractures left behind when young lives end violently. This case stands as a warning about access, about secrecy, about how quickly situations can spiral when fear, power, and poor judgment collide. It also stands as a reminder that truth is often complicated, uncomfortable, and incomplete. And perhaps the hardest reality of all is this: some answers may never come. What remains is the responsibility to remember, to examine the facts carefully, to speak about these cases with care rather than spectacle, and to ensure that the stories of those lost are not reduced to arguments or outcomes, but understood in their full human weight. If this story stayed with you, if it made you stop and think, take a moment to acknowledge the lives at the center of it. Share their story responsibly. Talk about the lessons it raises. And if you believe conversations like this matter, conversations grounded in evidence, empathy, and accountability, then support the work that keeps these stories from being forgotten. Because attention, when used thoughtfully, can be a form of respect.